The smell hit me first. Industrial cleaner mixed with mildew. The kind of scent that clings to your clothes long after you leave. I stood in the employee bathroom of my parents' house, staring at the cracked mirror above the utility sink, watching my reflection waver under the flickering fluorescent light. A mop bucket sat in the corner. Cleaning supplies lined the metal shelf above the toilet. This was where I got ready for work every morning. This was where my mother had told me I belonged. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Outside the thin door, I could hear them. My brother Marcus laughing loudly in the kitchen, probably showing off his new watch to our father. The coffee maker gurgled, filling the house with warmth I wasn't invited to share. My mother's voice drifted through, bright and animated in a way it never was when she spoke to me. They were a family in there. Out here, wedged between the garage and the laundry room, I was something else entirely. I was the tenant. The burden. The one who paid for everything but deserved nothing. I splashed cold water on my face and grabbed my backpack. Inside was my laptop, the one I'd bought myself 3 years ago when I graduated from University of Texas. The one that held everything my family knew nothing about. The secrets that kept me sane. The truth that would eventually set me free. I just didn't know that freedom would come crashing down in the most unexpected way possible, in front of the one person whose opinion my family actually cared about. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really started 4 years ago, when I thought coming home after college would be temporary. When I still believed my parents loved me the same way they loved Marcus. 4 years ago, I walked across that graduation stage with a degree in computer science and a head full of dreams. I'd worked 3 part-time jobs to get through school, took out loans for what I couldn't cover, and graduated with honors. My parents came to the ceremony. They took photos. My father even hugged me, something he rarely did. For about 6 hours, I felt like maybe I mattered to them. Maybe this achievement would change how they saw me. The conversation happened that same night, after Marcus had gone out with his friends to celebrate. Not my graduation, of course. He was celebrating getting hired at some tech distribution company in Austin. A job our father had helped him land through a friend of a friend. Marcus had barely finished his associate degree, but somehow his entry-level sales position warranted more excitement than my 4 years of academic struggle. Gerald, my father, sat at the head of the dining table with that expression he always wore when he was about to deliver news he'd already decided on. My mother Trish stood behind him, arms crossed, nodding before he even spoke. I should have known then. I should have seen it coming. Victoria, your mother and I have been talking, he started, using my full name the way he did when he wanted to remind me I wasn't a child anymore. You're graduated now. An adult. And adults contribute to the household. I remember nodding, expecting him to ask me to help with groceries or maybe pitch in for utilities once I found a job. That would have been reasonable. That would have been fair. We're going to charge you rent, he continued, sliding a piece of paper across the table. $1,200 a month. Plus you'll cover your share of the bills. Internet, electricity, water. We figured a third of everything is fair since there's 3 of you kids. 3 of us. Except Marcus paid nothing. Marcus, who'd been living at home for 6 years, who had a job, who had a truck they'd helped him buy. But I didn't say that. Not yet. I don't have a job yet, I said carefully. I just graduated yesterday. You've got that computer degree, my mother chimed in, her voice sharp with something that might have been resentment. Everyone says those jobs pay so much. You'll figure it out. I looked at the paper. It wasn't just an agreement about rent. It was a contract, printed from a template my father had clearly found online, with spaces for signatures and dates. At the bottom, in his blocky handwriting, he'd added stipulations. Rent due on the 1st of each month. No exceptions. No guests without approval. Quiet hours after 9 p.m. And then near the end, almost like an afterthought that I'd give up the bedroom I'd had since I was 12. Marcus needs more space for his home office, my mother explained when she saw me staring at that line. He's going to be doing important work, making calls to clients. Your room has better lighting and it's quieter. You can take the converted space by the garage. It's got everything you need. The converted space. They meant the laundry room they'd half finished 2 years ago, adding drywall and a single window that looked out onto the trash cans. It had been storage until that moment. It was barely 8 feet by 10 feet. But I signed the paper because I had nowhere else to go. Because my college roommate had moved back to Dallas. Because I had $17 in my checking account and 6 months of loan payments that would start coming due in 6 months. That first month, I applied to 73 jobs. I got 4 interviews. 2 resulted in offers, both for positions that paid $45,000 a year. I took the one that started sooner, a junior developer role at a marketing firm, and I thought maybe things would get better. I'd pay my dues at home for a few months, save up for a deposit on an apartment, and get out. But there's something about family that knows when you're planning to leave. They can sense it, the same way predators sense weakness. And they adapt their strategy to keep you trapped. The first month I paid rent, my father informed me the water heater had broken. It would cost $800 to replace. Could I cover it since I was living there too? The next month, my mother's car needed new brakes. Just $400. Surely I could help since she drove me to interviews before I got the job. By month 3, there was a problem with the roof. By month 4, the refrigerator was making a noise. Every paycheck disappeared into that house on Maple Street. Every dollar I tried to save found a new emergency to vanish into. And through it all, Marcus paid nothing. Marcus got the nice bedroom with the attached bathroom. Marcus got home-cooked meals waiting when he came back from work. Marcus got our parents' pride, their attention, their endless excuses for why he didn't need to contribute. He's building his career, my mother would say. He needs to focus on advancement, not worry about bills. You understand, don't you, Victoria? You've always been so independent. Independent. It was a word they used like a compliment but wielded like an insult, a justification for why I deserved less care, less consideration, less love. I was independent, which meant I could handle things alone. I was strong, which meant I didn't need support. I was smart, which meant I should figure it out myself. A year into this arrangement, something shifted in me. I was working late nights, learning new programming frameworks, building projects on the side to pad my portfolio. I'd started freelancing, picking up small contracts to develop websites and apps for local businesses. The extra money helped, but it also opened my eyes to something bigger. I was good at this. Really good. Better than the senior developers at my firm who spent more time in meetings than actually coding. One night, around 2 a.m., I was sitting in that converted laundry room on my bed, which was really just a mattress on a frame I'd bought from a garage sale, working on a project management app I designed for fun. It was elegant, intuitive, solved problems I'd seen at my day job where teams struggled to coordinate tasks across departments. I remember thinking someone should build this properly. Someone should turn this into a real product. And then I thought, why not me? I met Anika Patel 3 weeks later at a tech meetup downtown. She was a designer who'd just left her job at a startup that had failed, and she was hungry. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. For the next thing. We got coffee at Brew and Bites on 6th Street, and I showed her my prototype. Her eyes lit up in a way I'd never seen from my family when I talked about my work. This is good, she said, scrolling through the demo on my laptop. Like really good. Have you thought about developing it fully? I don't have the money, I admitted. Or the time. I'm working 60 hours a week between my job and freelancing just to cover rent. What if we did it together? She leaned forward, her excitement contagious. I've got some savings. Not much, but enough to cover initial costs. You handle development, I handle design and user experience. We split it 50-50, build it lean, see if we can get some early adopters. I should have said no. I should have told her I was too buried in family obligations, too exhausted from maintaining a life that barely belonged to me. But something in me that had been dormant for a year suddenly woke up. Something that remembered I'd graduated with honors. That I'd built a working chatbot for my senior project that professors said was publishable. That I was capable of more than just surviving. Okay, I said. Let's do it. We called it Catalyst Solutions. We filed the LLC paperwork with Anika's address, since I didn't want mail coming to my parents' house. We worked every night after I got off from my day job, meeting at coffee shops or at her loft in East Austin. We built the first version of Streamline OS in 4 months, a project management platform designed specifically for mid-sized companies that were too big for basic tools, but too small for enterprise solutions. Our first client came through a former colleague of Anika's. They paid us $5,000 for a 6-month contract. It felt like winning the lottery. We immediately rolled that money back into improving the platform, fixing bugs, adding features the client requested. Our second client came through a referral, then a third. By month 8, we had 12 clients and had brought on our first employee, a part-time developer who worked remotely. At home, nothing changed. I still paid $1,200 in rent plus my third of utilities. I still lived in the converted laundry room with its single window and lingering smell of detergent. I still used the employee bathroom, the half bath by the back entrance that my mother had designated as mine after Marcus complained that I took too long in the upstairs bathroom getting ready for work. "This one's closer to your room anyway," she'd said, as if she were doing me a favor. "And Marcus needs his space. He's got important calls in the morning." The employee bathroom. That's what my father started calling it, making a joke of it when his friends came over. "Victoria uses the employee facilities," he'd laugh, "since she's basically staff around here, paying her way." His friends would chuckle awkwardly, not sure if it was funny or cruel. It was both. It was always both. I stopped telling them about my day. Stopped mentioning the clients Anika and I were landing, or the features we were building. The one time I'd mentioned starting a side business, my father had scoffed. "Everyone thinks they're going to be Mark Zuckerberg," he'd said. 90% of those things fail within a year. Don't quit your day job." My mother had nodded in agreement, then asked when I was going to pay for the plumber they'd called to fix a leak I'd never even seen. Marcus, meanwhile, was thriving. He'd gotten a promotion at his sales job, or so he told everyone. I later found out it was a lateral move with a slightly different title, but he acted like he'd been named CEO. He bought a new truck, black and shiny, parked prominently in the driveway so everyone could see it. He started wearing expensive watches and taking our parents out to dinner, making a show of paying the bill while I sat at home eating ramen, because I'd just wired another $1,000 to cover what my father said was an urgent problem with the foundation. 2 years into building Catalyst Solutions, we landed our first major contract. A company in Houston, 200 employees, needed a complete overhaul of their project management system. They tried 3 other platforms and hated them all. They found us through a tech blog that had reviewed Streamline OS, and they were willing to pay $50,000 for implementation and a year of service. Anika and I sat in her loft after the contract was signed, just staring at each other in disbelief. $50,000. It was more than I made in a year at my day job. It was freedom, or at least the beginning of it. "You could move out," Anika said quietly. "Get your own place. Stop letting them bleed you dry." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But there was something about not being ready yet, about wanting to build something so undeniable that when I finally left, they'd know exactly what they'd lost. So I stayed. I paid rent. I used the employee bathroom. And I built an empire in secret, one line of code at a time. By year 3, Catalyst Solutions had 28 employees and had secured series of funding from a venture capital firm out of San Francisco. Our valuation hit $15 million. I was the CEO and founder of a legitimate tech company, and my family had no idea. At home, I was still just Victoria, the one who worked too much and never seemed to get anywhere, the one who couldn't even afford to move out at 25. I kept my work clothes at Anika's place. I'd shower at the gym before investor meetings. I ran my company from coffee shops and co-working spaces, always careful to keep my laptop angled away from prying eyes when I was at the house. My business card lived in a safety deposit box. My company hoodie stayed in my car, worn only when I was miles away from Riverside. The doubled life was exhausting, but it was also clarifying. Every time my mother made a comment about how I needed to apply myself more, I'd think about the team meeting I'd led that morning. Every time my father complained about the rent being late when I'd paid it on time, I'd remember signing a deal worth 6 figures. Every time Marcus bragged about his sales numbers, I'd smile and nod, knowing I'd just hired away one of his company's best clients. I started noticing the cracks in their facade around the time Catalyst Solutions moved into our first real office space. It was a beautiful suite on the 4th floor of a renovated building in the Domain. All glass walls and modern furniture, the kind of space that said we'd made it. We had 40 employees by then, a dedicated HR department, and contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies. Our platform was being featured in tech journals. Investors were calling us instead of the other way around. At home, my father complained that the lawn mower was broken. Could I chip in $300 for a new one? The grass was barely an inch tall, and I knew Marcus never touched it anyway, but I paid. My mother mentioned needing new curtains for the living room. The old ones were fine, but she wanted something that matched the new rug they'd bought. That was $400. I transferred the money without argument, watching my personal account dip while my business account held numbers that would have made them weep if they knew. The thing about living a secret life is that eventually, the worlds start to collide. You get careless, or maybe the universe just decides it's time for the truth to come out. For me, it started with something small. Something I should have seen coming, but was too buried in my own survival to notice. Marcus started dropping names at dinner. Companies his sales team was courting, deals he claimed to be working on. Most of it was exaggeration, the kind of puffing up he'd always done, but one night he mentioned a name that made my fork freeze halfway to my mouth. "We're trying to land Meridian Tech," he said, cutting into the steak our mother had prepared for him. "Big account. My boss David says if I close it, I'm looking at a serious commission. We're talking 5 figures. Meridian Tech was one of our clients. Had been for 8 months. They'd actually dropped their previous provider, the company Marcus worked for, specifically to switch to Streamline OS. I'd been in the pitch meeting myself, sitting across from their CTO while he explained all the ways their old system had failed them. The irony was so thick I nearly choked on it. "That's great," I managed, keeping my voice neutral. "Sounds like a big opportunity." "It is," Marcus said, puffing up with pride. "David's been giving me more responsibility lately. Says I've got a real future in account management. Some people are just natural-born salesmen, you know?" Our father beamed at him. Our mother reached over to squeeze his shoulder. And I sat there in my thrift store blouse, the one I wore at home because all my professional clothes stayed at Anika's, and I smiled like I was happy for him. Like I didn't know his big opportunity had already sailed away, taken by the sister they didn't think was worth a real bedroom. The collision happened 3 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon that started like any other. I'd worked from home that morning, taking calls from my car parked 2 blocks away so my parents wouldn't overhear, then headed to the office around noon. We had a walkthrough scheduled with a potential client, a healthcare technology company looking to streamline their development team's workflow. It was a big pitch, the kind that could lead to a 7-figure contract. Leslie Thompson, our CFO, had prepared a presentation that was nothing short of masterful. Anika had designed mock-ups of how their specific use case would look in our system. I'd rehearse my talking points until they felt natural. Everything was ready. Everything was perfect. Except I'd forgotten that the potential client had requested a tour of our actual office space. They wanted to see our company culture, meet some of the team, get a feel for who they'd be partnering with. It was standard procedure for deals this size, but it meant I needed to be there, visible, present as the CEO and founder. Not hiding in a coffee shop or taking calls from my car. Actually there in my office, being the person I'd worked 3 years to become. I dressed carefully that morning in Anika's bathroom, choosing a tailored navy blazer and gray slacks that I'd splurged on for investor meetings. Professional but approachable. Confident but not arrogant. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone who belonged in that corner office with my name on the door. Someone who'd built something real. I just didn't expect to see Marcus in our lobby when I arrived. He was standing near the reception desk with David Chun, his boss, both of them clearly waiting for someone. Marcus wore his best suit, the one he'd bought for his cousin's wedding, and he had that eager expression he always got when he was trying to impress someone important. David was checking his phone, looking mildly annoyed about something. I almost turned around. Almost walked right back out, and texted Leslie to handle the meeting without me. But David looked up at that exact moment, and his face broke into a surprised smile. "Victoria," he called out, waving me over. "I didn't know you'd be here today. Are you meeting with the Meridian team too?" My stomach dropped. Of course. David Chen knew me. He was the regional director at Marcus's company, but he was also someone I'd met at industry events, someone who'd been in the room when we'd pitched to several mutual clients. He knew exactly who I was and what I did. Marcus, standing right next to him, did not. I walked over because there was no other choice, my heels clicking on the polished concrete floor. Marcus looked confused, glancing between me and David like he couldn't quite figure out how we knew each other. "Hi, David," I said, keeping my voice professional. "Actually, I work here. I'm meeting with a potential client this afternoon." "You work here?" Marcus interjected, his confusion deepening. "At Catalyst Solutions? Since when?" David's expression shifted from friendly to puzzled. "Marcus, I thought you knew. Your sister founded this company. She's the CEO." He looked at me, then back at Marcus. "Wait, you two are siblings, right? Victoria Brennan and Marcus Brennan?" The lobby suddenly felt very small. Our receptionist, Jamie, had stopped typing and was watching with poorly concealed interest. A couple of our developers were walking past toward the break room, slowing down when they sensed drama. And Marcus was staring at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. "CEO," he repeated. "Victoria, what is he talking about?" "We should probably talk somewhere private," I started. But David was already pulling out his phone. "This is amazing," he said, scrolling through something. "I had no idea you two were related. Marcus, your sister's company is doing incredible things. We've lost 3 accounts to Streamline OS in the last year. Not that I'm bitter," he added with a laugh. "The product is legitimately better than what we offer. I keep telling corporate we need to innovate, or we're going to lose more." Marcus's face had gone pale, then red, then pale again. 3 accounts, he said slowly. "Meridian Tech. They just canceled on us last quarter." "That was you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was written all over my face. In the badge clipped to my blazer that said Victoria Brennan, CEO. In the way Jamie greeted me with "Good morning, Ms. Brennan." In the fact that we were standing in my company's lobby and everyone here knew exactly who I was. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Marcus's voice had risen slightly, drawing more attention from passing employees. "You've been living at home, paying rent, acting like you're barely getting by, and you own this whole company?" I needed to focus on building the business, I said carefully. And home life was complicated enough without mixing in work. David was looking between us now with growing understanding, his professional smile fading into something more uncomfortable. "I should let you two talk," he said. "Marcus, we can reschedule the Meridian meeting. Clearly that ship has sailed anyway." He nodded at me. "Victoria, great seeing you. Congratulations on everything you've built here." He left, and Marcus and I stood in the lobby of my company, 3 years of secrets hanging between us like smoke. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "Does Dad know?" he finally asked. "No. Mom. No one knows except my business partner and the people who work here." He looked around the lobby, taking in the modern furniture, the company logo on the wall, the employees moving purposefully through the space. "This is really yours?" "Yes." "How long?" 3 years. We started small, grew gradually. We're profitable now, expanding into new markets." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from our father when he was stressed. 3 years. You've been living in that converted laundry room, using the back bathroom, letting them treat you like hired help, and the whole time you had this?" "Yes." "Why?" It was a good question. Maybe the only question that mattered. Why had I stayed? Why had I paid rent I didn't need to pay, endured treatment I didn't deserve, kept myself small in a house where I'd never belonged? The simple answer was that I'd been building something, waiting for the right moment. But the real answer was more complicated. "Because I wanted to be sure," I said quietly. "Sure that I could make it. Sure that when I left, it would be on my terms. Sure that they'd understand exactly what they'd lost." Marcus stared at me for a long moment. "You know Dad's going to lose his mind when he finds out." "I know." And Mom's going to say you lied to them. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell them everything. That's the same thing to them. He shook his head slowly. Why are you still there, Victoria? Why are you still paying rent and taking their garbage when you clearly don't have to? I didn't have a good answer for that. Or maybe I did, but it wasn't one I wanted to say out loud. Because leaving would mean confronting them. Because staying meant I could control the narrative. Because some part of me, the part that had been conditioned for 26 years to believe I was less important than Marcus, still felt like I needed permission to take up space. I'm working on it, I finally said. Jamie's desk phone rang, breaking the tension. She answered it, then looked up at me. Ms. Brennan, your 2 o'clock is here. Conference room, eh? Thank you, Jamie. I turned back to Marcus. I have a meeting. We can talk about this later. Are you going to tell them? He asked. Or should I? Give me a week, I said. Let me handle it my way. He nodded slowly, still looking shell-shocked. 1 week. But Victoria, they're going to ask why I didn't say anything. What am I supposed to tell them? Tell them the truth. That I asked you not to. That it wasn't your secret to share. He left, and I stood in the lobby for another minute, trying to collect myself before the meeting. My hands were shaking slightly. 3 years of careful separation, of maintaining 2 completely different lives, and it had all come crashing down in a 5-minute conversation. Anika appeared at my elbow, having watched the whole thing from the second-floor walkway. You okay? Not really. Was that your brother? Yeah. He seemed surprised. That's putting it mildly. I took a deep breath, forcing my professional mask back into place. The client's waiting. We should go. Victoria, if you need to cancel. No. This meeting is important. I can deal with my family later. The meeting went well, surprisingly. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or maybe it was the clarity that comes from having your secret finally exposed. I pitched with a confidence I'd been holding back, spoke about our vision with a passion that wasn't filtered through fear of being discovered. The client signed a letter of intent before they left. It was a good day for the company, even if it was shaping up to be a terrible day for everything else. That evening, I drove back to the house on Maple Street with a sense of inevitability. Marcus's car was in the driveway, which was unusual for a Thursday. So was my father's SUV, which should have still been wherever he spent his afternoons. They were waiting for me. Marcus had told them. My 1-week grace period had lasted approximately 4 hours. I sat in my car for a few minutes, staring at the house I'd grown up in. The brick facade needed repainting. The lawn was still overgrown despite the expensive mower I'd bought. My bedroom window, the one that used to be mine before it became Marcus's home gym, had the curtains drawn. Everything looked exactly the same as it always had, but I wasn't the same person who'd left that morning. I grabbed my laptop bag and walked to the back entrance, the one that led past the employee bathroom to my converted laundry room. But before I could reach my door, my father's voice boomed from the kitchen. Victoria. Living room. Now. I changed direction, moving through the narrow hallway into the main part of the house. They were all there. Gerald in his recliner, Trish on the couch, Marcus standing awkwardly near the window like he was trying to disappear into the curtains. The TV was off, which never happened. This was an ambush. Marcus tells us you have some explaining to do. My father started, his arms crossed over his chest. Something about a company? I set my bag down carefully by the door, keeping my escape route clear. I started a business 3 years ago. It's done well. That's really all there is to it. All there is to it. My mother's voice was sharp. You've been lying to us for 3 years. Living under our roof, pretending to struggle, when apparently you're some kind of millionaire. I'm not a millionaire, I said calmly, which was technically true. My equity was worth millions, but my actual liquid assets were modest. And I didn't lie. You never asked what I did with my time outside my day job. Don't get smart with me, Gerald snapped. You let us believe you were barely making ends meet. Do you know how many times your mother and I worried about you? How many times we tried to help you? Help. The word was almost funny. They'd helped themselves to $1,200 a month in rent. They'd helped themselves to thousands more for emergencies that never seemed to quite materialize. They'd helped themselves to my labor, my time, my dignity, all while giving everything to Marcus. I appreciate your concern. I said, my voice flat. But I've been managing fine. Managing fine? Trish stood up, her face flushed. You've been running around playing businesswoman while shirking your responsibilities here. Do you know how much work it takes to maintain this house? How much your father and I sacrificed to keep a roof over your head? I pay for that roof, I said quietly. I pay $1,200 a month plus utilities. That's not shirking responsibility. That's paying more than my share. Your share? Gerald's voice rose. You think $1,200 covers everything? The mortgage on this place is $2,200. The property taxes, the insurance, the maintenance. You think you're paying your fair share? I wanted to point out that Marcus paid nothing. That their mortgage was actually only $1,800 because I'd seen the paperwork once when my father left it on the kitchen counter. That the maintenance they kept claiming to do never seemed to actually improve anything. But I bit my tongue because some part of me still wanted to believe we could have a rational conversation. I've paid you over $50,000 in the last 3 years, I said instead. Not counting the emergency repairs, the new appliances, all the other things you've asked for. I think that's more than fair for a converted laundry room and bathroom privileges. Bathroom privileges, my mother repeated, her voice dripping with scorn. Listen to yourself. You sound entitled. Spoiled. We gave you a place to live when you had nowhere else to go. And this is how you repay us? By hiding money and acting like we're the villains? Marcus shifted uncomfortably near the window. Mom, I don't think that's what she meant. Stay out of this, Marcus. Gerald cut him off. Your sister needs to explain herself. I looked at each of them in turn. My father, red-faced and angry because his control was slipping. My mother, who'd somehow convinced herself that charging her daughter rent while treating her like staff was an act of generosity. Marcus, who'd spent 3 years enjoying privileges he'd done nothing to earn while I slept in a room that still smelled like fabric softener. What do you want me to explain? I asked. That I worked hard and built something successful? That I didn't advertise it, because I knew exactly how you'd react? That I kept it separate from home, because I needed one part of my life that was just mine? What we want, Gerald said slowly, is for you to start contributing properly. If you've got this big successful company, then you can afford to pay more rent. $2,500 a month sounds fair. Plus we're going to need you to cover the roof repairs. The real ones this time, not just patching. That's going to run about $15,000. And there it was. Not congratulations. Not pride. Not even curiosity about what I'd built. Just immediate calculation of how much more they could extract from me now that they knew I had something worth taking. No, I said. The word hung in the air like a grenade. Excuse me. My mother's voice went dangerously quiet. I said no. I'm not paying $2,500 a month. I'm not paying for roof repairs. Actually, I'm not paying for anything anymore. Gerald stood up from his recliner, his full height meant to be intimidating. You'll pay what we ask, or you'll find somewhere else to live. Those are your options. Okay, I said simply. I'll find somewhere else to live. I watched shock ripple across their faces. They'd expected me to cave, to negotiate, to apologize and promise to do better. They'd expected anything except agreement. You're not serious, Trish said. I'm completely serious. I'll be out by the end of the week. Marcus finally spoke up, his voice uncertain. Victoria, maybe we should all just calm down and talk about this rationally. You don't have to move out. We can figure something out that works for everyone. I turned to look at him, really look at him, maybe for the first time in years. My brother who'd never paid a dime in rent. Who'd gotten the master bedroom, the home-cooked meals, the unconditional support. Who'd been handed opportunities while I'd been handed bills. And even now, he thought there was a middle ground, some compromise that would let everyone pretend this was normal. Marcus, when was the last time you paid rent? I asked quietly. He blinked. What? Rent? You've lived here for 6 years since you graduated high school. You have a job. You have that new truck in the driveway. When was the last time Mom and Dad charged you $1,200 a month plus utilities? That's different. My mother interjected quickly. Marcus is saving for his future. He's building his career. We're helping him get established. And what was I doing? I asked. When I came home after college with student loans and no job lined up, what was I doing if not trying to get established? You had that computer degree, Gerald said. As if that explained everything. Those jobs pay well. Marcus is in sales, it's different. The money's not as reliable. My starting salary was $45,000, I said. Marcus makes $55,000. He told everyone it was $80,000, but I saw his tax documents last year when they were on the kitchen counter. So please explain to me how his situation was less stable than mine. The silence that followed was thick with revelations nobody wanted to acknowledge. Trish's face had gone tight, the way it did when she was cornered. Gerald's jaw worked like he was chewing through responses and discarding them. You went through my mail? Marcus asked, but his voice was weak. He knew the real issue wasn't the snooping. It was sitting out, I said. But that's not the point. The point is that you've had 3 years of free rent while I've paid over $50,000 to live in a laundry room. The point is that you got the bedroom with the attached bathroom, while I got told to use the employee facilities. The point is that I built a multimillion-dollar company while being treated like I couldn't manage my own life. And now that you know about it, the first thing Dad does is demand more money. We're your parents, Trish said, her voice rising. We raised you, fed you, clothed you. You owe us respect and gratitude, not this hostile attitude. I gave you respect, I replied, my voice steady despite the anger building in my chest. I gave you gratitude. I gave you 3 years of paying for things that weren't my responsibility, while you told me I wasn't contributing enough. I gave you silence when I could have told you exactly what I thought of the way you treated me compared to Marcus. What I'm not giving you anymore is control. Gerald took a step toward me. You watch your tone. This is still my house. You're right, I said, not backing away. It is your house, which is why I'm leaving. I'll pack tonight and be gone by morning. Tonight? My mother's anger cracked, showing something that might have been panic underneath. Victoria, don't be dramatic. We can discuss this like adults. We are discussing it like adults. Adults who recognize when a living situation isn't working anymore. Adults who understand that paying rent doesn't mean paying for the privilege of being treated poorly. Treated poorly? Gerald's face was getting redder. We gave you a place to live when you had nothing. We could have charged you market rate. Do you know what a room goes for in Austin these days? About $800 for a decent place with proper amenities, I said. I've been looking at listings. So yes, I know exactly what things cost. And I know that $1,200 for a converted laundry room with bathroom restrictions is well above market rate. Especially considering I've also been covering emergency repairs that never seem to actually happen. Trish's mouth opened and closed. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. The water heater Dad said cost $800 to replace? I found the receipt in his office last month when I was looking for stamps. It cost $350. The roof repair from last summer? The contractor's estimate that was accidentally left on the counter said $4,200, not the $6,000 you told me you needed. Should I go on? Marcus had gone very still near the window. My parents were staring at me like I'd grown a second head. The truth was a weapon I'd been holding for months, maybe years, waiting for the right moment to use it. This wasn't the moment I'd imagined, but it was the one I had. You've been spying on us, my mother said, her voice shaking with either rage or fear. I couldn't tell which. Going through our private papers, keeping track of everything like some kind of auditor. I've been paying attention, I corrected. There's a difference. And yes, when someone keeps asking me for money for emergencies, I started checking to see if the emergencies were real. Turns out about 60% of them weren't. Get out, Gerald said, his voice low and dangerous. Get out of my house right now. I'm going, I said, picking up my laptop bag. But I want to be clear about something. The money I've given you over the past 3 years? That was a gift based on the assumption we had a normal family relationship. I don't want it back. Consider it payment for the first 18 years of room and board. But from this moment on, I don't owe you anything. Not money, not explanations, not access to my life. We're done. You can't mean that, Trish said, and for the first time, She sounded less angry and more afraid. We're your family. Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me, I said. Family doesn't charge one child rent while letting the other live free. Family doesn't take advantage of someone's situation and call it helping. You want to be my family? Then act like it. But I'm not holding my breath. I walked toward my room, the converted laundry room that had been my prison for 3 years. Behind me, I could hear my mother saying something to my father in a low, urgent voice. Marcus was silent. I didn't care. I'd said what needed to be said. And now I just needed to pack and leave. The room looked smaller than ever when I opened the door. The single bed with its garage sale frame. The plastic storage drawers I'd bought at Target because there was no closet. The window that looked out at the garbage cans. The view that had been my morning greeting for 1,000 mornings. I'd lived smaller than I needed to, saved less than I could have, all in service of maintaining some kind of connection to people who'd never valued me the way I deserved. I pulled out the suitcases I kept under the bed and started packing. Clothes, toiletries, the few personal items I'd allowed myself to keep here. My important documents were already at Anika's place. My good work clothes, my professional life, the parts of me that mattered, those had never been in this room. This was just the shell I'd left behind. The version of Victoria that my parents wanted me to be. Small, struggling, grateful for scraps. I was folding a sweater when Marcus appeared in the doorway. He stood there awkwardly, hands in his pockets, looking at everything except me. I didn't know it was that bad, he finally said. Yes, you did. I mean, I knew they charged you rent, but I didn't realize all the other stuff. The fake emergencies, the price inflation. Yes, you did, Marcus. You live here. You see the same things I see. You just chose not to pay attention because it benefited you not to. He flinched but didn't argue. Are you really leaving tonight? Yes. Where will you go? I have options. The company, he said, understanding dawning. You've had options this whole time. Yes. He leaned against the doorframe, watching me pack. David, my boss, he said you've been doing really well. Said your platform is better than anything else on the market. It is. He also said you've taken clients from us, including Meridian, the account I've been trying to land for 6 months. I didn't take them, I said, folding another shirt. They came to us because your company's product didn't meet their needs. That's just business. It's more than that though, isn't it? His voice was quiet. You're competing in my industry. You had to know there was a chance we'd cross paths eventually. I knew. Did you do it on purpose? Build a company in my field just to prove you could do it better? I stopped packing and looked at him directly. No, Marcus. Believe it or not, I didn't build a multi-million-dollar company just to spite you. I did it because I'm good at what I do, because I saw a need in the market, and because I wanted to create something meaningful. The fact that it happens to compete with your employer is just coincidence. But you never told me. 3 years, and you never said a word. What was I supposed to say? Hey Marcus, while you're bragging about your sales numbers at dinner, I just landed a 6-figure contract? While mom and dad are praising you for getting promoted, I just hired my 20th employee. It would have been cruel. Cruel to who? To you. To them. To everyone. Because then we'd have to confront the fact that they've been treating us completely differently, and that you've been benefiting from it. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I never asked them to treat you differently. You never asked them not to either. What was I supposed to do? Tell them to charge me rent too? Demand that they give you your room back? You could have acknowledged it, I said, my voice tired. You could have said something, anything, to show you noticed I was being treated unfairly. But you didn't. You took the free rent and the nice room and the home-cooked meals, and you let them treat me like hired help because it was easier than standing up for me. I'm sorry, he said, and to his credit he sounded like he meant it. I should have said something. I should have done something. I just didn't think it was that serious. That's the problem, Marcus. It never seems serious when you're the one benefiting from it. He nodded slowly, looking down at his shoes. Are you going to tell David about this? About how mom and dad treat you? Why would I? It's none of his business. This is between me and our family. But you work with him. He's going to ask questions. Then I'll answer them professionally. What happens in this house doesn't affect my business relationships. Except it does now, Marcus pointed out. He knows you're my sister. He knows you've been living at home. If he finds out about the rest, it's going to look bad. For who? For all of us. People will think we're dysfunctional. I almost laughed. Marcus, we are dysfunctional. We have been for years. The only difference is now other people might find out about it. He looked miserable standing there in my doorway, and part of me felt bad for him. He'd been raised with different expectations, given different treatment, shaped by the same parents but into a completely different person. It wasn't entirely his fault. But it wasn't entirely not his fault either. What do you want me to tell them? He asked. After you leave, they're going to have questions. Tell them the truth. That I left because I was tired of being treated like I didn't matter. That I built a successful company because I'm capable and driven. Not because I'm trying to prove something to them. That I'll talk to them when they're ready to have a real conversation about the way they've treated me, but not before. They're not going to like that. I know. I don't particularly care anymore. I zipped up the first suitcase and started on the second. Marcus stayed in the doorway, watching me dismantle 3 years of my life in this tiny room. When I pulled out the last drawer, something fell out from behind it. A birthday card from my grandmother, the one who'd passed away 2 years ago. She'd always been kind to me, had always made me feel valued in a way my parents never did. I kept the card hidden because my mother had made some comment about me being too old for birthday cards, as if acknowledging my existence once a year was childish. I tucked it carefully into my bag and continued packing. Marcus finally spoke again. For what it's worth, I think what you've built is impressive. The company, everything. I wish I'd known so I could have told you that. Thanks, I said, though the words felt hollow. It was nice to hear, but it was also too late. 3 years too late. Are we going to be okay? He asked. You and me, I mean. After all this? I considered the question. Marcus and I had never been close, not really. We'd been raised in the same house but lived different lives, held to different standards, given different grace. Could we build a real relationship now, without our parents' interference? Did I even want to? I don't know. I said honestly. I think that depends on what you do next. Whether you keep benefiting from the way they treat people, or whether you start questioning it. That's fair, he said quietly. I finished packing my second suitcase, took one last look around the room, and realized there was nothing else I wanted to take. Everything meaningful, everything that mattered, had already been removed months ago. This was just the detritus of a life I'd been trying to escape. I'm going to carry these out to my car, I said. Then I'm going to come back for my laptop and leave my key on the kitchen table. If Mom and Dad want to talk to me, they have my number. But I'm not having another conversation like the one we just had. Understood, Marcus said, stepping aside to let me pass. I carried my suitcases through the house, past the living room where my parents were still sitting in stunned silence. Neither of them looked at me. Neither of them said anything. The TV was still off. The silence was deafening. Outside, the evening air was cool and clear. I loaded my suitcases into my Honda, the reliable old car I'd bought for $3,000 in college, and had been too practical to replace even when I could afford something nicer. It started on the first try, the way it always did, and I sat there for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, looking at the house I'd grown up in. 26 years I'd spent trying to earn love from people who'd given it freely to my brother, but made me pay for every scrap. 26 years of being told I was too independent, too serious, too focused on the wrong things. 26 years of being second best in my own family. I went back inside one last time. My laptop bag was where I'd left it. My parents were still in the living room. I could hear my mother crying softly, my father's low voice saying something I couldn't make out. Part of me wanted to go in there, to try one more time to make them understand. But I'd spent 3 years building a company from nothing. I knew about sunk costs. I knew when to cut your losses and walk away. I left my key on the kitchen table next to the salt and pepper shakers. I didn't leave a note. There was nothing left to say that I hadn't already said. Then I walked out the back door, past the employee bathroom with its flickering fluorescent light, Past the converted laundry room that would probably become storage again. Past all the small indignities that had added up to one unbearable whole. I got in my car and drove away from Maple Street without looking back. My phone was already ringing before I reached the end of the block. My mother's number. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father called. Then my mother again. I turned off the ringer and kept driving. Anika had texted me earlier, after Marcus had presumably told the family. My couch is yours for as long as you need it. Or the spare room. Or both. Come over whenever. She'd attached a key emoji and a heart. That was family. Someone who offered help without conditions, who celebrated your success instead of calculating how to profit from it. I pulled into a parking spot near her loft and sat there for a minute, letting the reality sink in. I'd done it. After 3 years of planning and building and preparing, I'd finally cut the cord. I'd walked away from people who'd been draining me dry, and I'd done it on my own terms. My phone buzzed with a text. Marcus. They're freaking out. Dad's talking about calling your work. I told him that's a bad idea, but you might want to give him a heads up at the office just in case. I typed back quickly. Thanks for the warning. And Marcus? You should really think about moving out too. They're not going to get better just because I left. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally. Yeah, I know. I grabbed my laptop bag and headed up to Anika's door. She opened it before I could knock. Must have been watching from the window. Her expression was a mix of concern and pride. And something that might have been relief. You actually did it, she said. I actually did it. How do you feel? I thought about it for a moment, taking inventory of the emotions swirling through me. Anger, yes. Sadness, definitely. Fear about what came next, a little. But underneath all of that, something else. Something light and bright and new. Free, I said. I feel free. She pulled me into a hug, and I let myself lean into it. Let myself be vulnerable for a moment with someone who'd earned that trust. When we pulled apart, she was grinning. Good. Because we have a lot to celebrate. The healthcare company signed the contract this afternoon. Full implementation, 2-year commitment, and they want to talk about bringing us in for their other divisions too. We're looking at close to $2 million in revenue from this one client. $2 million. The number that would have seemed impossible 3 years ago. The number my parents would never know about because they'd lost the right to share in my successes. That's incredible, I said and meant it. It is. And you know what else? You're going to find an apartment, a real apartment with actual rooms and a bathroom that's just yours. And you're going to live like the successful CEO you are instead of hiding in a laundry room pretending to struggle. I wasn't pretending to struggle. I protested. I was just maintaining separation between my work life and home life. You were hiding, Anika said gently. From them, from yourself, from the truth of what you've accomplished. But you're not hiding anymore. She was right. I'd been hiding for 3 years. Keeping my success small and quiet so it wouldn't threaten the fragile peace at home. But there was no peace to protect anymore. There was just me, and the company I'd built, and the life I was finally free to live. Okay, I said. No more hiding. No more hiding, she agreed. Now come inside. I ordered Thai food, and I want to hear every detail of what happened. Especially the part where you called them out on the fake emergencies. I've been waiting years for you to drop that bomb. We went inside, and I told her everything. She laughed in all the right places, looked appropriately horrified at others, and by the end of it, we were both a little wine drunk and a lot relieved that this chapter was finally over. What are you going to do now? She asked as we were cleaning up the takeout containers. Tomorrow? I'm going to start apartment hunting. Next week? I'm going to focus on the business, on growing what we've built. And eventually, when I'm ready, I might reach out to my parents and see if they're willing to have a real conversation. And if they're not, I shrugged. Then they're not. I've spent enough time trying to earn love from people who weren't willing to give it. I'm done chasing that. Good, Anika said firmly. You deserve so much better than how they treated you. That night, I slept on her couch even though she'd offered the spare room. I wanted to ease into this new life, not jump into it all at once. I lay there in the dark, listening to the sounds of the city outside. and realized that for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't calculating rent money in my head. Wasn't worrying about what emergency would drain my savings next. Wasn't preparing myself for another indignity disguised as family obligation. I was just Victoria Brennan, CEO of Catalyst Solutions, a woman who'd built something remarkable despite every obstacle thrown in her path. And tomorrow, I was going to start living like it. The apartment hunt took less time than I expected. By Wednesday, I'd signed a lease on a modern 2-bedroom in downtown Austin, all floor-to-ceiling windows and exposed brick, the kind of place I'd scrolled past online for years thinking it wasn't for people like me. The rent was $3,000 a month, more than double what I'd been paying my parents, but it came with actual amenities. A real kitchen with granite countertops, a bathroom with a rainfall shower, a second bedroom I could turn into a home office. Space that was mine, paid for with money I'd earned, with no strings attached. Anika helped me move in that weekend. We made a day of it, stopping at furniture stores and home goods shops, picking out pieces that actually reflected my taste instead of whatever was cheapest at the thrift store. A velvet couch in deep emerald green. A dining table that sat 6 even though I lived alone. Artwork for the walls, real prints from local artists, not posters tacked up with pushpins. Every purchase felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd been forced to suppress. "You're nesting," Anika observed as I arranged throw pillows for the 3rd time. "It's actually kind of adorable." "I've never had a place that felt like mine," I admitted. "Even in college, I had roommates. And at my parents' house, well, that was never mine." "It is now," she said, gesturing around the sun-filled living room. "All of this is yours. You earned it." My phone had been relatively quiet since I left. A few texts from Marcus, mostly logistical questions about mail, or things I might have left behind. Nothing from my parents directly, though I suspected they were communicating through him. I'd changed my voicemail to a professional greeting, and stopped checking messages from unknown numbers. If they wanted to reach me, they knew how. If they wanted to apologize, they had my email, my text, a dozen ways to say they were sorry for how they treated me. They chose silence instead, and I was learning to be okay with that. The following Monday, I had a meeting with our investors. Catalyst Solutions was preparing for Series B funding, and the projections looked strong. We'd grown our client base by 40% in the last quarter. Revenue was up. Employee retention was excellent. Every metric pointed to a company that was not just surviving but thriving. I walked into that conference room in my tailored suit, carrying a presentation I'd perfected over the weekend, and I felt different. Lighter somehow. The weight of maintaining 2 separate lives, of constantly calculating what I could say and what I needed to hide, had lifted. I was just myself now. One version, whole and complete. The pitch went flawlessly. By the end, we had verbal commitments for $8 million in funding, enough to expand into 3 new markets and double our engineering team. Leslie was grinning as we left the building. Anika was already texting our team with the good news. And I was thinking about how my father had once told me that 90% of startups fail, that I shouldn't quit my day job, that my dreams were impractical. I'd quit that day job 6 months ago. Catalyst Solutions was my only focus now, and it was succeeding beyond anything I'd imagined in those early days, coding in coffee shops and hiding my ambition from people who should have been celebrating it. That evening, I decided to drive past the old house. Not to stop, not to knock on the door, just to see it one more time from my new vantage point. The grass was overgrown again, I noticed. The flower beds my mother had been so proud of were full of weeds. My father's SUV was in the driveway, but Marcus's truck was gone. I wondered if he'd taken my advice, if he'd finally moved out too. I didn't wonder long. As I was about to drive away, Marcus himself called. "Hey," he said, his voice uncertain. "You got a minute?" "Sure. What's up?" "I moved out. Got an apartment in North Austin, nothing fancy but it's mine." I pulled over to the side of the road, processing this. "When?" "Yesterday. I'd been thinking about what you said, about how they weren't going to change just because you left. And you were right. After you were gone, they started in on me, asking why I didn't contribute more, saying I was ungrateful, that I was turning into you." He laughed bitterly. Like being compared to you was an insult. How'd they take it when you told them you were leaving? About as well as you'd expect. Dad threatened to cut me off, which is hilarious considering I've been supporting myself for years. Mom cried and said I was abandoning them in their old age. I reminded her she's 53 and in perfect health. Good for you, I said and meant it. Seriously, Marcus. That took guts. Yeah, well, I should have done it years ago. Should have stood up for you years ago. I've been thinking a lot about that, about how I just let them treat you like that because it was easier for me. You can't change the past, I said. Trust me, I've tried. You can only decide what you do moving forward. That's what I wanted to talk to you about, actually. I want to make things right between us. Or at least try to. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm hoping maybe we could get coffee sometime. Talk. Not about them, just about us. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep that door closed the way I'd closed the door on my parents. But Marcus was trying, genuinely trying, in a way they weren't. And maybe that deserved a chance. Okay, I said. Coffee. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. I'm not going to pretend the past didn't happen. I'm not going to make it easy for you just because you're finally seeing what was wrong with how things were. I know. I don't expect easy. I just want honest. Then we can do coffee. Text me sometimes that work for you. We hung up, and I sat in my car for a few more minutes, looking at the house that had never really been a home. The windows were dark except for the flicker of the TV in the living room. I wondered what my parents were doing, if they were talking about me, if they understood yet what they'd lost. Probably not. People like that rarely did. I drove back to my apartment, to my emerald couch and my artwork and my space that was entirely mine, and I didn't look back. The weeks turned into months. Catalyst Solutions continued to grow. We opened an office in Houston, then one in Dallas. Our employee count hit 75. We were featured in TechCrunch, then Forbes. Investors were calling us instead of the other way around. Everything I'd worked for was materializing in ways that exceeded even my most optimistic projections. Marcus and I did get coffee, then lunch, then the occasional dinner. It was awkward at first, both of us dancing around years of dysfunction and resentment. But slowly, carefully, we started building something real. Not the relationship we'd had as kids, which had been mostly proximity-based anyway, but something new, something honest. He told me about the pressure he'd felt, always being the golden child, but never quite living up to what our parents wanted. I told him about the isolation, the constant feeling of being less than despite my achievements. We didn't excuse each other, didn't offer easy forgiveness, but we listened. That was more than we'd ever done before. My parents, meanwhile, remained silent. No calls, no texts, no attempts at reconciliation. I heard through Marcus that they'd had to downsize, had sold the house on Maple Street, and moved into a smaller place in a cheaper neighborhood. The loss of my rent money and the inflated emergency payments had hit harder than they'd expected. I didn't feel guilty about it. They'd made their choices. 5 months after I left, something unexpected happened. I was at the office late on a Thursday, reviewing contracts for a major new client, when Jamie from reception called up. Ms. Brennan, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's personal. A Patricia Brennan? My mother. My stomach tightened, but I kept my voice level. Send her up. I had 3 minutes to prepare myself while she made her way to the 4th floor. 3 minutes to decide how I wanted to handle this, what I was willing to say or hear. By the time she knocked on my office door, I'd settled into the calm professionalism I used for difficult client meetings. Come in. She looked older than I remembered, though it had only been 5 months. Thinner too, her clothes hanging loose in a way that suggested weight loss that wasn't intentional. She stood in the doorway of my corner office, taking in the view of downtown Austin through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the awards on my shelf, the company logo on the wall. This is really something, she said quietly. Thank you. Please sit. She took one of the chairs across from my desk, her hands clutched around her purse. I waited. I'd learned in business that silence was a powerful tool, that sometimes the best strategy was to let the other person speak first. I owe you an apology, she finally said. Your father and I both do. The way we treated you, the things we said, the expectations we had. It wasn't fair. No, it wasn't. We were wrong about a lot of things. About what you were capable of, about what you needed from us, about the kind of person you are. She looked around the office again. Marcus told me about the company, about how successful you've been. I didn't believe him at first. I thought he was exaggerating to make a point. What point would that be? That we'd underestimated you. That we'd treated you like you needed our help when you were actually doing better than any of us. Her voice cracked slightly. I'm proud of you, Victoria. I should have said that 3 years ago or 10 years ago, or every day of your life. But I'm saying it now. The words I'd wanted to hear for so long sat between us, and I waited for them to change something, to heal something. They didn't. They were just words, coming far too late from someone who'd had countless opportunities to say them when they would have mattered. I appreciate that, I said carefully. But pride after the fact, when you've seen the results, isn't the same as support when someone needs it. I know that. And I can't take back the past 3 years, or the way we made you feel. But I'm hoping, maybe, we could start over. Build something new. Why now? I asked. 5 months of silence, and now you show up here wanting to build something new. What changed? She looked down at her hands. We lost the house. Without your rent money and the extra you were giving us, we couldn't keep up with everything. We had to sell, had to move into a small apartment in Pflugerville. Your father's been depressed, barely leaves the house. And I realized that we'd lost more than the house. We'd lost you. There it was. The truth underneath the apology. They hadn't come because they'd genuinely realized how they'd hurt me. They'd come because they were facing consequences, because their comfortable life had collapsed without my financial support, because they wanted something from me. I'm sorry you lost your house, I said, and I was. Not sorry enough to fix it, but sorry in the abstract way you feel for anyone experiencing hardship. But that's not my responsibility. I'm not asking you to fix it, she said quickly. I'm not asking for money or help or anything like that. I just want my daughter back. Which daughter? The one you charged $1,200 a month to live in a laundry room? The one you told to use the employee bathroom because Marcus needed his space? The one whose achievements you dismissed and whose dreams you called impractical? That's not fair, Victoria. We made mistakes, but we were trying to prepare you for the real world. To make you independent and strong. No, I said, my voice sharp. You were treating me differently than Marcus, and you were benefiting from it financially. Don't rewrite history now that it's convenient. I paid you over $50,000 in 3 years, money I needed for student loans and savings and building my future. Money you took while telling me I wasn't contributing enough. The emergencies were real, she protested weakly. Some of them were. Some of them weren't. And you know which ones I'm talking about. She fell silent, her eyes shining with tears she didn't let fall. I felt something shift in me, not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of closure. She'd come here hoping for reconciliation, hoping I'd be the same desperate girl who'd signed that rental contract 4 years ago. But I wasn't her anymore. I'd built something she couldn't touch, couldn't diminish, couldn't take from me. I think you should go, I said gently. I have work to finish, and I don't think this conversation is going anywhere productive. Will you think about it? She asked, standing slowly. About trying again? About letting us be part of your life? I'll think about it, I said, though we both knew what that meant. But I'm not making any promises. If you and Dad want a relationship with me, it's going to be on my terms. No more financial expectations, no more comparing me to Marcus, no more treating me like I'm less important. Equal respect or nothing at all. That's fair, she said quietly. More than fair, actually. She left, and I sat in my office for a long time after, watching the sun set over Austin through my windows. I thought about calling Anika, or Marcus, or someone to process what had just happened. But instead I just sat there, feeling the weight of that conversation settle, and then lift. They'd come back, my parents. They'd apologized, sort of. They'd asked for another chance. And I'd said maybe, which was more than they deserved but less than they wanted. It felt right, that balance. It felt like control. 2 weeks later, David Chin called me. Marcus's former boss, The one who'd inadvertently revealed my secret in the Catalyst Solutions lobby all those months ago. Victoria, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I wanted to reach out about something. My company is finally admitting we need to completely overhaul our project management system. The one we've been using is losing us clients. He paused. Clients like the ones you've been winning. I appreciate the call, David, but you know we're direct competitors in this space. That's actually what I wanted to talk about. What if we weren't? What if instead of competing, we partnered? My company has the sales infrastructure and client relationships. You have the superior product and the technical expertise. There might be a mutually beneficial arrangement here. I scheduled a meeting for the following week. The partnership he proposed was interesting. A revenue-sharing model where his company would become a reseller of Streamline OS, earning commission on sales while we maintain product development and support. It would give us access to their established client base while allowing them to offer a better solution. The negotiations took 3 weeks, but eventually we structured a deal that worked for both sides. It was worth close to $12 million over 2 years, with options to expand. The day we signed the contract, David shook my hand with genuine respect. Your brother mentioned you built this whole company while living at home, while your family had no idea what you were doing, he said. That's remarkable. The discipline that must have taken. It wasn't discipline, I said. It was survival. But thank you. Walking out of that meeting, I thought about the version of myself who'd sat in that employee bathroom 4 years ago, getting ready for a day of work while my family laughed in the kitchen. She'd had dreams but no real belief they could come true. She'd had talent but no space to use it. She'd had ambition but nowhere to direct it except into secret late-night coding sessions, and hopes she barely admitted to herself. That version of me would never have believed this moment was possible. Would never have imagined sitting across from her brother's former boss as an equal, negotiating a multi-million-dollar deal for a company she'd built from nothing. Would never have thought she deserved the corner office or the downtown apartment or any of the success she'd worked so hard to achieve. But she'd done it anyway. She'd built Catalyst Solutions one line of code at a time, one client at a time, one small victory at a time. She'd done it while paying rent she couldn't afford and enduring treatment she didn't deserve. She'd done it without support, without encouragement, without anyone telling her she could. And now here I was, Victoria Brennan, CEO of a company valued at $45 million. Not hiding anymore. Not pretending to be less than I was. Not making myself small to make other people comfortable. 6 months after I left Maple Street, Catalyst Solutions was acquired by a major tech corporation. Not a full buyout. We maintained operational independence and I stayed on as CEO. But they bought a controlling stake for $90 million. My share, after investors and employees were paid out, was $38 million. $38 million. The number was so large it didn't feel real. I sat in my accountant's office, looking at the wire transfer confirmation, and I thought about my father asking for $15,000 for roof repairs. About my mother charging me $1,200 a month for a laundry room. About every emergency, every crisis, every made-up expense they'd used to drain my savings. I could have bought their house on Maple Street 15 times over with what I'd just made. Could have solved every financial problem they'd ever had without even noticing the money was gone. But I wouldn't. Because this wasn't about money, not really. It was about value, about respect, about being seen for who you actually are instead of who someone decides you should be. Marcus called that evening. He'd heard about the acquisition through industry channels before I'd had a chance to tell him. Victoria, this is insane. Congratulations doesn't even begin to cover it. Thanks. It's still sinking in, honestly. Have you told Mom and Dad? No. Have you? No. But they're going to find out. It's going to be in the news, industry publications, everywhere. I know. They're going to reach out, he warned. They're going to want to be part of this. Then they're going to be disappointed. He was quiet for a moment. You're really done with them, aren't you? I'm done accepting less than I deserve from anyone, including family. Especially family. If they want a relationship with me, they know what they need to do. Acknowledge how they treated me. Take responsibility without excuses. Show up as real people, not just when they need something. That's fair, Marcus said. For what it's worth, I think you're handling this exactly right. The news broke 2 days later. TechCrunch ran the story first, then it spread to Forbes, Bloomberg, The Wall Street Journal. 26-year-old founder sells majority stake in her company for $90 million. One of Austin's fastest-growing startups acquired by tech giant. Female CEO in male-dominated field achieves massive success. My phone exploded with messages. Old college friends I hadn't heard from in years. Former co-workers from my first job. Distant relatives emerging from the woodwork. And finally, inevitably, my parents. My father called first. I let it go to voicemail. He called again an hour later. Again to voicemail. On the third try, I answered. Victoria, I saw the news. I had to hear about my own daughter's success from a newspaper. Do you know how that feels? Actually, I do, I said calmly. It feels like being excluded from something important. Like you don't matter enough to be included. I've felt that way for most of my life. That's not the same thing at all. Isn't it? You wanted me to tell you about my success. I wanted you to support me while I was building it. Looks like we both ended up disappointed. We're your parents, he said, his voice rising. We have a right to know what's happening in your life. No, you don't. You have the right to the relationship you've built with me, which is virtually nothing. You want more than that. Then build it. But you don't get to skip the work and jump straight to the benefits. After everything we did for you, this is how you repay us. And there it was. The same song, different verse. Everything came back to what I owed them, what they were entitled to, what they deserved from me simply because of biology and proximity. I don't owe you anything, I said. I paid you back for the first 18 years. I paid you back in actual money for the 3 years after that. We're square. Anything else I give you from this point forward is a gift, not an obligation. And I don't give gifts to people who treat me the way you did. You're being cruel, he said. Your mother is heartbroken. Then maybe she shouldn't have charged her daughter rent while letting her son live free. Maybe she shouldn't have made me use a separate bathroom like I was staff instead of family. Maybe she should have celebrated my achievements instead of demanding money every time I had something to celebrate. I hung up before he could respond and blocked the number. Then I blocked my mother's number too. If they wanted to reach me, they could write a letter. They could send an email. They could go through Marcus. But I was done with phone calls that only happened when they wanted something. The story continued to make waves. I did a few carefully selected interviews, spoke at a Women in Tech conference, appeared on a podcast about entrepreneurship. Every time I told my story, I was careful about the details. I mentioned starting the company while living at home, working multiple jobs, building something in secret. I never explicitly named my parents or detailed their treatment, but people read between the lines. The support was overwhelming. Women reached out to tell me similar stories, how they'd been underestimated by family, how they'd built success despite lack of support, how they'd had to hide their achievements to avoid jealousy or demands. We'd all been taught to make ourselves smaller, to apologize for our ambition, to downplay our success. And we were all learning, slowly, to take up the space we'd earned. A year after I left the house on Maple Street, Catalyst Solutions had offices in 6 cities and over 200 employees. I'd moved into a penthouse apartment with a view of Lady Bird Lake. I'd paid off my student loans, set up a scholarship fund at my university, and started an initiative to provide coding education to underprivileged youth in Austin. I ran into my mother at a charity gala. Pure coincidence, we'd both been invited by different people. She was there with my father, both of them clearly uncomfortable in the formal setting. I was there with a date, a software architect I'd been seeing for a few months, someone who knew my whole story and loved me anyway. She approached me near the bar, my father hanging back a few feet. Victoria, you look beautiful. Thank you. You look well. I wanted to say, what you've done with your company, with your life, it's extraordinary. I'm sorry I never told you that when it mattered. I appreciate you saying so. Is there any chance, she started, then stopped, gathering courage. Is there any chance you'd consider having dinner with us? Your father and me. Not to ask for anything, just to talk. To try to understand where we went wrong. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was sincere, I could see that. The hardship of the past year had humbled her in ways that success never could have. But sincerity wasn't enough. Regret wasn't enough. Understanding where they went wrong was a start, but it wasn't the finish. Maybe, I said. But not yet. I'm not ready. When will you be ready? I don't know. Maybe never. Maybe someday. But it has to be when I'm ready, not when you need it to be. She nodded, her eyes glistening. That's fair. More than fair. She walked back to my father, and I watched them leave the gala early, looking older and smaller than I remembered. I felt a pang of something that wasn't quite sadness, and wasn't quite relief. Just recognition that this was how the story had to go. Not with easy reconciliation or Hollywood endings, but with boundaries held and dignity maintained. My date found me a few minutes later. Was that them? Yeah. You okay? I'm okay. And I was. I was more than okay. I was successful, respected, financially secure. I had real friends, a thriving business, a life I'd built entirely on my own terms. I had everything I'd dreamed of in that employee bathroom. Everything I'd worked for in those late nights at coffee shops. Everything I'd fought for when I finally walked away. The employee bathroom. I thought about it sometimes, that small space with its industrial cleaner smell and flickering light. The place my parents thought I belonged, where they tried to keep me small and manageable and dependent. They'd meant it as a punishment, a reminder of my place in their hierarchy. Instead, it had become my catalyst. Every morning I'd stood in that bathroom, looking at my reflection in that cracked mirror. I'd promised myself something better. I'd planned my escape. I'd built my empire. I'd become the person I was always meant to be, despite every obstacle they'd put in my path. David Chun had asked why the company founder was using staff facilities. At the time, the question had exposed secrets and forced confrontations. But looking back, I realized it was the right question. Why was I using staff facilities? Why had I accepted less? Why had I let anyone make me feel like I belonged in the bathroom instead of the boardroom? The answer was simple. I didn't. I never did. It just took me a while to realize it, to build the courage and resources to claim the space I deserved. But once I did, once I walked out of that house and into my own life, everything changed. Not because of the money, though that helped. Not because of the success, though that validated years of hard work. But because I finally understood my own value, finally refused to accept anything less than full respect, finally became the architect of my own story instead of a supporting character in someone else's. I stood at the gala, looking out over the city I'd conquered, the life I'd built, the future stretching out before me bright with possibility. And I smiled, because the girl who'd slept in a laundry room was now the woman who owned the building. That was the real victory. Not the money or the company or the recognition, but the knowledge that I'd saved myself, that I'd bet on my own worth when no one else would, and that I'd won. 2 years had passed since the acquisition, and Catalyst Solutions had become something beyond even my most ambitious projections. We'd expanded internationally, opening offices in London and Toronto. Our employee count had crossed 400. The platform had evolved into something sophisticated and powerful, trusted by companies across dozens of industries. We weren't just successful anymore. We were an industry standard. I'd moved again, this time into a house in Tarrytown, one of Austin's most established neighborhoods. It had a garden I actually tended, a home office with custom built-ins, and enough space that I could host the dinner parties I'd started throwing for my team and friends. The house felt like an arrival point, a declaration that I'd not only made it but that I was staying. My relationship with Marcus had continued to strengthen. We'd built something genuine over countless coffee meetings and honest conversations. He'd gotten promoted at his new job, was dating someone serious, had even started going to therapy to work through the family dynamics we'd both been shaped by. We talked weekly now, sometimes about business, sometimes about nothing, but always with a respect that had been entirely absent in our childhood. Our parents remained at arm's length. My mother had sent a few more letters over the years, increasingly self-aware in their acknowledgement of how she and my father had failed me. My father had never written, though Marcus reported he'd softened somewhat, that age and consequence were teaching him things that fatherhood hadn't. I read the letters my mother sent. Sometimes I responded with a brief acknowledgement. We weren't reconciled, but we weren't completely severed either. We existed in a careful middle ground that protected me while leaving the door cracked open, just barely. The tech world had embraced me in ways I'd never anticipated. I'd been featured on the cover of Incorporated magazine, named to Forbes 30 Under 30 list, invited to speak at conferences around the world. People wanted to know my story, wanted to understand how a 23-year-old had built a company worth hundreds of millions while living in what I carefully described as challenging circumstances. I never gave them the full story, never detailed the employee bathroom or the rent or the way my family had tried to keep me small. That felt too personal, too much like airing grievances for sympathy. Instead, I talked about persistence, about building despite obstacles, about believing in yourself when others don't. The specifics didn't matter. The principle did. One afternoon in March, I received an unexpected email. It was from a woman named Teresa Hoffman, and it began, "You don't know me, but I believe we have something significant in common." She went on to explain that she was the director of a nonprofit called Foundation First, an organization that helped young adults aging out of foster care, escaping abusive households, or otherwise finding themselves without family support. They provided temporary housing, job training, mental health services, and financial literacy education. They were expanding their programs and had been researching potential donors and board members. "Your story resonated with our mission," she wrote. "Not the version in the magazines, but the real one. I have sources in the Austin tech community who've heard whispers about what you overcame to build Catalyst solutions. Young people who are told they don't matter, who are exploited by the people who should protect them, who have to build their futures in secret because their families can't handle their success. That's exactly who we serve." She was inviting me to tour their facilities, to meet some of the young people they worked with, to consider getting involved. No pressure, she emphasized. Just an opportunity to see if there might be alignment between my experience and their mission. I accepted the invitation immediately. The Foundation First building was in East Austin, a converted warehouse that had been transformed into something warm and welcoming. The walls were painted in cheerful colors. There was a commercial kitchen where residents learned culinary skills, a computer lab with new equipment, small private rooms that residents could personalize. Everything about it was designed to say, "You matter, you belong, you deserve good things." Teresa met me in the lobby, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the efficient energy of someone who'd spent decades in social services. She walked me through the facility, introducing me to staff and a few residents who'd agreed to share their stories. There was Marcus, not my brother but a 19-year-old who'd left home after his parents tried to force him into conversion therapy. He was working toward his GED and learning web design in the computer lab. There was Jennifer, 22, who'd been kicked out at 18 for getting pregnant, and had spent 3 years homeless before finding Foundation First. She was now training to be a dental hygienist, her daughter in their on-site childcare. There was David, 20, who'd been his family's primary income source since he was 16, working full-time while his parents stayed home. When he tried to save money for college, they'd called him selfish and threatened to report his car as stolen even though he'd bought it himself. He'd left with nothing but his car and the clothes he was wearing. Now he was in community college studying engineering. Every story was different in its details, but identical in its core. Young people who'd been exploited, underestimated, or abused by the people who should have loved them. Young people who'd had to choose between staying trapped and walking away with nothing. Young people who were rebuilding their lives one deliberate step at a time. I saw myself in every single one of them. After the tour, Teresa and I sat in her office. "What did you think?" she asked. "I think this is the most important work I've seen in years," I said honestly. "How can I help?" We spent the next 2 hours talking about Foundation First's needs. Funding, always funding, but also mentorship programs, particularly for residents interested in tech careers. Partnership opportunities with companies that might hire their graduates. Expanded housing to serve more young people. The list was long, and every item on it was critical. "I'd like to make a significant donation," I said. "And I'd like to establish a specific program, if you're open to it. A tech training initiative for residents interested in software development, with guaranteed internships at Catalyst Solutions for graduates who complete the program. Teresa's eyes widened. That would be incredible. How significant are we talking? $2 million to start. $1 million for general operations, $1 million specifically for the tech program. And I'll commit to hiring at least 5 graduates per year as full-time employees, not just interns. She sat back in her chair, momentarily speechless. Victoria, that's extraordinary. That would double our annual budget. We could serve twice as many young people, expand our housing, hire more counselors. Good, I said. Because there are too many people out there sleeping in laundry rooms, using employee bathrooms, being told they don't deserve better. Someone should tell them they do. The story of my donation leaked within weeks, despite my request for privacy. A journalist at the Austin Chronicle got wind of it and started digging, connecting dots between my background and Foundation First's mission. She called my office requesting an interview. I almost declined. I'd spent years protecting the details of my past, maintaining professional boundaries between my public success and my private pain. But something about Foundation First's mission made me reconsider. If sharing my story could help other young people recognize their situation as abuse, could give them language for what they were experiencing, could show them a path forward, maybe it was worth the vulnerability. I agreed to the interview with one condition. We'd do it at Foundation First, and some of the residents could participate if they wanted to. The article that resulted was titled From Employee Bathroom to Executive Suite: How Victoria Brennan Built Her Empire Despite Family Exploitation. It was the first time I'd allowed the full story to be published. The rent, the fake emergencies, the converted laundry room, the employee bathroom, all of it. I talked about the shame of being treated that way by my own parents, the isolation of keeping my success secret, the moment I finally walked away. But I also talked about the young people at Foundation First who were facing similar situations, who needed to know that leaving was possible, that building something better was achievable, that they deserved more than they were getting. I talked about the tech program we were launching, and how we were looking for other companies to partner with us, to create opportunities for talented young people who just needed a chance. The article went viral. Within 48 hours, it had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. My inbox flooded with messages. Some were from other young people sharing their own stories of family exploitation. Some were from adults who'd gone through similar experiences and wished they'd had the courage to leave sooner. Some were from parents who read the article and realized, with apparent horror, that they'd been treating their own children the same way. And some were from my mother. She called first, but I didn't answer. Then she emailed, a long message that I read 3 times before deciding how to respond. She'd seen the article. She'd read every word. She was devastated by the public nature of it, but also, she claimed, grateful that I'd finally been honest about what they'd put me through. Your father won't admit it, but reading that article destroyed something in him, she wrote. Seeing our treatment of you described that way, as exploitation and abuse, forced him to confront what we'd done. He's been different since it came out. Quieter. More reflective. I think he's ashamed, though he won't say it. She went on to apologize again, more specifically this time. She named individual incidents, acknowledged the fake emergencies, admitted that they'd treated Marcus and me with completely different standards. She didn't make excuses or try to justify anything. She just said she was sorry, that she'd been wrong, that she understood if I never forgave her. I'm writing because I want you to know that the article did something important, she concluded. Not just for other young people who might see themselves in your story, but for us too. We needed to see it in black and white, needed to have our behavior named for what it was. I'm not asking for reconciliation or forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that your words had an impact, even on the people who caused your pain. I sat with that email for several days before responding. When I finally did, I kept it brief. Thank you for reading the article and for your message. I'm glad if it helped you understand the impact of your actions. I'm not ready for more than this, but I appreciate your acknowledgement. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was communication, honest and boundaried, which was more than we'd had before. The tech program at Foundation First launched 6 months later. We'd designed a 16-week intensive curriculum covering web development, software fundamentals, and professional skills. I taught some of the classes myself, bringing in my senior engineers for others. We provided each student with a laptop, covered all materials, and paid them a small stipend so they didn't have to work other jobs during the program. The first cohort had 12 students. They ranged from 18 to 24, came from various backgrounds, and had different levels of prior knowledge. What they all had in common was hunger, determination, and a bone-deep understanding that this opportunity might be their only shot at building something better. I saw myself in every single class, in the student who stayed late every night, pushing to understand concepts that didn't come easily, in the one who was working through trauma while trying to learn JavaScript, in the quiet one who was brilliant but had been told so many times that she was worthless that she could barely accept praise. Teaching them was healing something in me I hadn't realized was still wounded. Every concept they mastered, every project they completed, every moment of pride when they realized they could do this. It was like going back in time and telling my younger self that she was capable, that she mattered, that she deserved to take up space in this industry. All 12 students completed the program. 10 accepted full-time positions at Catalyst Solutions. The other 2 had received offers from other tech companies, partnerships we'd established specifically to create more opportunities. Every single one of them was building a future that had seemed impossible 6 months earlier. At the graduation ceremony, held at Foundation First with families and supporters invited, I gave a short speech. I talked about potential, about second chances, about the importance of people who believe in you when you're struggling to believe in yourself. I talked about how talent exists everywhere but opportunity doesn't, and how it was our responsibility as people who'd made it to reach back and pull others forward. Then I told them something I'd never said publicly before. I spent 3 years building my company in secret, because I was afraid of what my family would do if they knew I was succeeding. I worked from coffee shops and libraries because I couldn't let them see what I was creating. I made myself small in my own home, because I'd been taught that taking up space was selfish. The room was completely silent. Every person in this room who's a Foundation First graduate has faced something similar. You've been told you're not enough, that you don't deserve better, that your dreams are unrealistic. You've been exploited or abused or abandoned by people who should have protected you. And yet here you are. You completed a rigorous program. You learn new skills. You're starting careers in an industry that desperately needs diverse voices and perspectives. I looked at each graduate in turn. You proved them wrong. Everyone who said you couldn't, who said you wouldn't, who said you didn't deserve the chance. You proved them all wrong. And now you get to build whatever future you want. Not the one anyone else chose for you. The one you're going to create for yourselves. The applause that followed was thunderous. Parents and friends and staff members all standing, celebrating young people who'd overcome more obstacles than most people face in a lifetime. I stood there watching them accept their certificates, watching them hug their supporters, watching them step into futures that were finally, truly theirs. After the ceremony, one of the graduates approached me. Her name was Simone, and she'd been one of the quiet ones, the brilliant student who struggled to accept that she belonged. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. Of course. When I first got to Foundation First, I was planning to just stay for a month or 2, save some money, and leave. I didn't think I deserved help. I didn't think programs like this were for people like me. She looked down at her certificate. "But Teresa told me about you. About how you built your company while living in a laundry room. And I thought if she can do that, maybe I can do something too." "You did do something," I said. "You learned to code. You're starting a career. You rebuilt your life." "I know. But it's more than that. You showed me that the way people treat you doesn't define what you're worth. That you can be amazing even when the people around you refuse to see it. That was the thing I needed to understand more than the coding." I hugged her. This young woman I barely knew but understood completely. "You're going to do incredible things," I said. "And when you do, remember to reach back for someone else." "I will," she promised. "I absolutely will." The success of the program led to expansion. Other companies in Austin started their own versions. Foundation First received a flood of donations and was able to open a second location. The model spread to other cities. And everywhere it went, young people who'd been told they didn't matter were getting chances to prove otherwise. 3 years after leaving my parents' house, I was invited to give a TED Talk. The topic was building success from nothing, and I wrestled with how honest to be. The article had already made my story public, but a TED Talk was different. It would be preserved forever, watched by millions, become part of my permanent legacy. I decided to go all in. The talk opened with me describing the employee bathroom, the flickering light, the cleaning supplies, the view of the trash cans. I described getting ready for work in that space, looking at myself in the cracked mirror, promising myself that someday I'd build something better. I talked about the rent, the fake emergencies, the way I'd had to hide my success because my family couldn't handle it. But I also talked about the decision to leave, about the power of walking away from situations that diminish you, about the importance of valuing yourself even when others don't. I talked about Foundation First and the young people I'd met there, about how many talented, capable people are being held back by families who see them as resources to exploit rather than individuals to support. And I ended with this. Success isn't just about what you build. It's about who you become in the process. I'm not successful because I built a company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm successful because I learned to value myself enough to leave a situation that was destroying me. Because I bet on my own worth when no one else would. Because I took the experience of being made small and used it to create something that helps other people expand. The employee bathroom was supposed to put me in my place. Instead, it showed me I'd never had a place in that house, not really. And once I understood that, I was free to build my own place on my own terms, with my own rules. That's the real victory. Not the money or the recognition, or any of the external markers of success. But the knowledge that I saved myself. And now I get to help others save themselves too. The talk got a standing ovation. It's been viewed over 20 million times. But more importantly, it connected with people who needed to hear it. My inbox filled with messages from people who'd recognized themselves in my story, who'd found the courage to leave their own employee bathrooms, who'd started believing they deserved better. Marcus came to the TED Talk sitting in the audience with his girlfriend. Afterward, he found me backstage. "That was incredible," he said, his eyes red like he'd been crying. "I had no idea how bad it really was. I mean, I knew, but hearing you describe it like that, so plainly, it made me realize how much I was complicit in." "You were a kid too," I said. "You were raised in the same system, just with different rules." "That doesn't excuse it. I should have said something. I should have done something." "Maybe. But you're doing something now. You moved out, you're building your own life, you're in therapy. That counts for something." "Have you talked to them?" he asked. "Since the article?" "A little. Email mostly. Mom's trying. Dad's still dad, just quieter about it." "Are you going to forgive them?" I thought about it. I don't know. Forgiveness feels like something they want more than something I need. What I need is to keep building, to keep growing, to keep helping other people who are where I was. If forgiveness happens along the way, fine. But it's not my priority. "That's fair," he said. "You know, I'm really proud to be your brother. Even though I took all your company's clients?" I teased. "Especially because of that. You're kind of a badass." I laughed and we hugged. And I felt grateful for this relationship we'd built from the rubble of our childhood. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. For years after I left, on a random Tuesday in October, I was working from home when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I checked the security camera, my stomach dropped. It was my father. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him at the gala. Thinner, grayer, carrying himself with less certainty. He stood on my porch holding a small package, looking around at my house with an expression I couldn't quite read. I debated not answering. I had every right to ignore him, to maintain my boundaries, to protect the peace I'd built. But something made me open the door. Curiosity maybe, or the hope that he'd finally found the words he should have said years ago. "Victoria," he said, and his voice was different. Softer. Less commanding. "Dad. I know I shouldn't be here uninvited. I know you probably don't want to see me. But I needed to give you this." He held out the package, and I needed to say some things. I took the package but didn't open it. You could have mailed this, or given it to Marcus. I could have, but I needed to say this to your face, to look you in the eye when I say it. He took a breath. I failed you. As a father, as a parent, as a human being. I treated you in ways that were inexcusable, and I did it while convincing myself I was helping you become strong. I was wrong. I was cruel. And I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air between us. I'd imagined this moment countless times, but now that it was happening, I didn't know what to feel. What changed? I asked. Seeing myself through other people's eyes. Reading your article, watching your TED Talk, hearing the way people talk about what I did to you. I couldn't hide from it anymore. Couldn't pretend it was normal discipline or tough love, or preparing you for the real world. It was abuse. Financial abuse, emotional abuse. And I did it to my own daughter. Yes, you did. I don't expect forgiveness, he continued. I don't even think I deserve the chance to ask for it. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. I understand what I took from you. What I tried to make you believe about yourself. And I'm sorry. More sorry than words can express. I looked at the package in my hands. What is this? Documentation of every payment you made to us over those 3 years. Every rent check, every emergency repair, everything. I added up the total. It was $68,412. He pulled out an envelope. This is a cashier's check for that amount. I'm paying you back. I stared at the envelope. I don't want your money. I know. But I need to give it to you anyway. I need you to know that I recognize I stole from you. That I exploited you. That what I did was wrong on every level. His voice cracked. You deserved better. You deserved a father who celebrated your success instead of trying to profit from it. You deserved parents who made you feel valued instead of making you feel like staff. I can't give you those things retroactively, but I can give you this. I took the envelope but didn't open it. This doesn't fix anything. I know. And it doesn't mean we have a relationship now. I know that too. We stood there on my porch, the morning sun warm on my back, and I realized this was as close to closure as I was likely to get. Not perfect closure, not the healing transformation movies promise, but acknowledgement. Recognition. A parent finally seeing their child for who she was and admitting they'd failed her. I'm going to donate this money, I said, holding up the envelope. To Foundation First. So it can help other young people escape situations like the one you put me in. That's appropriate, he said quietly. Good even. Was there anything else? Just one thing. Your mother and I are proud of you. We've always been proud, we just did a terrible job of showing it. Of showing you that you mattered to us. I wanted you to know that. Even if it's too late for it to mean anything. It means something, I admitted. Not enough to change where we are. But something. He nodded, started to leave, then turned back. You were right, by the way. In your TED Talk. Success isn't about what you build. It's about who you become. And you became someone extraordinary despite me, not because of me. I hope you know that. I do. He walked back to his car, and I stood on my porch watching him drive away. I felt lighter somehow, like a weight I'd been carrying had finally been lifted. Not because he'd apologized or paid me back, but because I'd faced him from a position of strength and realized he had no power over me anymore. None at all. I went inside and opened the package. Inside was a photo album, one I recognized from my childhood. It was full of pictures of me at various ages. At my elementary school science fair, holding my first place ribbon. At my 8th grade graduation, smiling despite my braces. At my high school robotics competition. At my college graduation. My parents had been there for all of it. They'd taken these photos, saved them in this album. They'd had evidence all along that I was capable, that I was achieving, that I deserved recognition. They just hadn't acted on it. Hadn't let it change how they treated me. I flipped through the album, looking at the girl I'd been. She looked happy in most of the photos, unaware of how differently she'd be treated than her brother. Not yet beaten down by years of exploitation and dismissal. I wanted to reach back through time and tell her it would be okay. That she'd survive it. that she'd built something amazing, that she'd save herself. But maybe she already knew. Maybe that's why she kept achieving despite the lack of support. Maybe she'd always known, deep down, that she was worth more than they were willing to give her. I closed the album and put it on my shelf, next to my awards and the photos I'd chosen for myself. It belonged there, a reminder of where I'd come from and how far I'd traveled. A reminder that I'd always been that girl, capable and determined, even when nobody acknowledged it. That evening, I called Marcus. Dad came by today. He did what? I told him about the visit, the apology, the check, the photo album. Wow, Marcus said when I finished. That's huge. Are you okay? I think so. It was strange but also kind of necessary. Like closing a chapter that had been left open. Are you going to see them again? Try to build something? Maybe eventually. But not now. Right now I need to focus on what I'm building, not what I lost. That makes sense. For what it's worth, I think you handled it perfectly. We talked for a while longer. Then I hung up and sat in my home office, looking out at the garden I'd planted. My life was full in ways that had nothing to do with my parents. I had work that mattered, friendships that sustained me, a community I'd built from scratch. I had foundation first graduates sending me updates about their lives, thanking me for giving them a chance. I had employees at Catalyst Solutions who'd grown with the company, who'd built their own success stories alongside mine. I had enough. More than enough. I'd built something beautiful from nothing, created a life that reflected my values and my worth. The employee bathroom was a memory now, a story I told to help others, a reminder of where I'd started but not where I'd stayed. And in the end, that was the victory. Not that my parents had finally apologized, though that mattered. Not that they'd acknowledged what they'd done, though that helped. But that I'd saved myself before they got the chance to destroy me. That I'd bet everything on my own worth and won. That I'd taken their attempts to make me small, and used them as fuel to build something vast. The house was quiet around me, peaceful in a way that the house on Maple Street had never been. This was home. This was the life I'd fought for. This was what victory looked like, not in the moment of triumph but in the calm that followed, in the knowledge that I'd built something that couldn't be taken away, because it had never belonged to anyone but me. I picked up my phone and texted Simone, the graduate who'd told me I'd helped her understand her worth. How's the new job going? She responded almost immediately. Amazing. Just finished my first big project. My manager said I'm a natural. Thank you again for everything. You did the work, I typed back. I just opened the door. Proud of you. And I was. Proud of her, proud of all the foundation first graduates, proud of myself for finding a way to turn pain into purpose. That was the real measure of success. Not the money in my bank account or the company I'd built, but the lives I'd touched, the opportunities I'd created, the doors I'd opened for people who'd been told they didn't deserve to walk through them. The employee bathroom was where my story started, but it wasn't where it ended. It ended here, in my own home, surrounded by evidence of my own worth, finally understanding that I'd always been enough. I just needed the courage to believe it, and the strength to act on that belief. And now, every day, I got to help other people find that same courage, that same strength. Got to look them in the eye and say, you deserve better, and here's how to get it. That was worth more than any apology, any check, any recognition from people who should have given it freely years ago. I was free. Finally, completely free. And freedom, I'd learned, wasn't about where you lived or how much money you had. It was about knowing your own worth, and refusing to accept anything less. It was about building something that reflected who you really were instead of who others wanted you to be. It was about saving yourself when no one else would. And then using that experience to save others. That was my story. From employee bathroom to executive suite, from invisible to influential, from doubted to undeniable. And it was only just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.